Hello and welcome to GameSack. Previously I covered all the Nintendo 64 games that used the expansion RAM, and I figured I'd do the same for the Sega Saturn. The Saturn had two official RAM expansion cartridges. One allowed for an extra megabyte of RAM, and a later one allowed for an extra 4 megabytes. The Saturn already had 2 megabytes internally, so games could potentially use up to 6 megabytes of RAM, or 48 megabits in 16-bit terms. That's still less than the Nintendo 64's 8 megabytes with the expansion pack. There were also two games that used ROM cartridges that worked only with those games. This was known in Japan as the Twin Advanced ROM system. These contained 2 megabytes of data on them and worked in tandem with the rest of the game on CD. And then there are the backup cartridges for game saves. Many, if not most, Saturn games could save directly to these cartridges, and they offered a lot more space for save data than the internal storage. There are also a ton of third-party cartridges that let you do simple things like let you play games from a different region, to those that offer the RAM expansion capabilities as well as the ability to store saves. None of these let you store the game save directly to the cartridge, however, instead forcing you to manually transfer them back and forth. They also compress the memory files, which can corrupt them. And you gotta be careful because some third-party cartridges aren't beveled, so they can damage the Saturn's already finicky cartridge slot. And of course, they aren't compatible with the Twin Advanced ROM system games. Now, I'm not going to cover games that save directly to the backup cart because honestly that would be pointless, so let's get started with some games that take advantage of the RAM and ROM cartridges. We begin with Astra Superstars from Sunsoft. This is a weird one-on-one fighting game where you float around in the air for some reason, never touching the ground. This one doesn't require a RAM cart, but it can take advantage of one. As you boot, the game will let you know if it detects a cartridge and if it's a 4 megabyte one. As you play the game, there's not much of anything that's visually different as the game is optimized to play without the cartridge. However, the load time to the first match is reduced by about 12 frames with the 1 megabyte cartridge and over 4 seconds with the 4 megabyte cartridge. The load times between matches after the first one are slightly shorter with a cartridge, but only by a few frames. I love the artwork and colors in this game. For some reason, it's presented in interlaced mode, but the only thing actually in high resolution here is the HUD. This game is definitely worth trying. Cotton 2 from Success. This is a cool horizontal shooter featuring a witch. This can be used without a RAM cart and it works just fine. But if you insert either a 1 megabyte or 4 megabyte cart, it'll enhance the game slightly. Both cartridges work exactly the same here. Basically, all it does is add a few more voices to the game as you play. Yeah, that's pretty much it. As it says right here in plain English on the back of the case, you can use it with an extended RAM cartridge which lets you enjoy additional voices. So don't let anyone tell you that it changes the animation or does anything else. It should be known that the follow-up to this one, called Cotton Boomerang, does not take advantage of a RAM cartridge, yet it still has more voices during gameplay than Cotton 2. Cyberbots from Capcom. This is a pretty unique and cool fighting game with giant mechs. This one doesn't need a cartridge to run, but you can use a RAM cart and both of them work exactly the same way. And what way that is can be difficult to tell. For one, it adds an option to let you turn it on or off. Not sure why you'd want to turn that off if you put the cartridge in there, but okay. In reality, it adds a few frames of animation per character here and there, but it can be tough to tell during the hectic action, even when they're placed side by side. I think the clunky mech designs make it a little bit more difficult to discern the extra frames as you play. The loading times for each match are actually shorter if you don't use a RAM cart by a second or two. Bottom line, you're not missing much if you're playing this one without a RAM cart, and it's a little better than the PlayStation version either way. Dungeons & Dragons Shadow over Mystara from Capcom. This is the second game in Capcom's Dungeons & Dragons collection, which contains ports of their D&D arcade beat-em-ups. Only this disc uses the RAM expansion, and you need the 4 megabyte cartridge or the game will give you this screen. This is a fantastic beat-em-up based on D&D lore, but there's a lot of loading in here which does bring things down. I feel that Capcom could have optimized this a lot better, as it kinda seems like a quick and dirty port. It's still a super fun game though that I think everyone should try. Fighter's History Dynamite, also known as Karnov's Revenge. This one-on-one fighting game was originally made by Data East for the Neo Geo and published by Sega themselves to the Saturn. This one requires a RAM cartridge, it doesn't matter which one you use. If you try to boot without one, you get this screen. The game starts with an initial loading screen that takes quite a bit of time. After that, the game runs great. What's most impressive to me is that there's not much in the way of perceptible loading times here at all. Even between matches, the game is very snappy. You can even play the game in English if you set the options to overseas mode. You can also choose original or arranged music. The game looks great on the Saturn. This may not be the best one-on-one fighter in the world, but honestly, I recommend it.
Big tornado! Big tornado! Dynamite! Big tornado! Big tornado! Big tornado!
Final Fight Revenge from Capcom, USA. This one-on-one fighting game was the last unique title released on the console. This requires the 4MB RAM card. If you boot without one, you get this screen in English. The game itself is pretty dreadful, and I'm surprised that Capcom approved of it. As for what the extra RAM adds to this game, well, it's anyone's guess. It doesn't use 2D animation, and polygons don't usually need a lot of memory to be animated in a bunch of different ways. The backgrounds are simple, and the loading times feel average. Since this game was originally made on the STV arcade hardware, which is basically a slightly beefed up Saturn, it's most likely here so that the game can run without having to optimize it very much. No matter what though, you should probably stay away from this one.
Geronimo! Geronimo!
Some of the games I mentioned in this episode have demo discs, and they can also take advantage of the extended RAM. I'm not going to cover the demo discs themselves because I'm already talking about the games, but if they have demo discs, then they can take advantage of those cartridges as well. It should also be noted that every game that requires a RAM cartridge has a variant that comes packed in with that cartridge, and one that doesn't, just in case you already have a cartridge. Anyway, let's get back to the games. Friends, Saishun no Kagayaki from NEC Interchannel. This one is a visual novel with weepy music. An external RAM cartridge is optional, but not needed. There's no telling what the extra memory does to this one. It will recognize a cartridge on the title screen if it detects one. Of course, I have no idea what to do in this game since it's all in Japanese. If this looks good to you, I guess maybe bring a RAM cartridge to increase your enjoyment by 1.3%. Groove On Fight from Atlas. This is a 2D one-on-one fighter that requires a RAM card. Here's what you get if you don't have one. This is a tag team fighting game, which means you choose two characters and you can switch out between them at any time. Of course, so can your opponents. This right here is why it requires the extra RAM. It needs to store the animation for 4 characters all at once. Not that the animation is anything special, but I can see why it's needed. It is missing some animation compared to the arcade, but again, it's only using 1 extra meg of RAM. Unfortunately, you will see a lot of loading, especially when you get to the final boss. The game itself is interesting, and I highly recommend trying it out. The King of Fighters 95 from SNK. This Neo Geo conversion of the fighting game used its own proprietary ROM card. If you try to play it without the cartridge or any other cartridge, you get this screen kindly telling you to do better with your life. This is an excellent port of the original arcade with very few compromises. The game's backgrounds live on the 2 MB ROM cartridge as well as character pictures and other miscellaneous things. The sprites, game code, and music all live on the CD. Each time a character is changed out in a match, the next one has to be loaded in. Since the backgrounds don't need to be loaded into RAM like most games, this allows the characters to have maybe a few more frames of animation than they otherwise would have. Still, the constant loading of the characters is kind of annoying. Compared to the PlayStation version of the game, it has more background animation as well as faster loading. It also loads faster than the Neo Geo CD version. The music here is the plain vanilla Neo Geo music, and sadly it's not arranged. This is the only game that requires an external cartridge of any kind to be released outside of Japan, but only in Europe. This version, of course, has English text. This game has been hacked so that the disc loads data onto a RAM cartridge, so you don't need the proprietary cartridge that was packed in with it to enjoy it. The King of Fighters 96 from SNK. They turned to the 1 MB RAM cart for this fighting game, and the 1 MB cart specifically is absolutely required. Here's what you see if you don't use a cartridge. If you use a 4 MB cart, the game works mostly fine, but sometimes you can get graphical corruption in the character sprites. For this reason, many of the cheap third-party 4-in-1 cartridges won't work well with this game because they don't emulate the 1 MB mode properly. Like King of Fighters 95, there's lots of loading here if you play in team mode. The music features some great arrangements and CD quality from the Neo Geo CD version, but for whatever reason, they're presented in mono. The tracks on the CD itself are in stereo if you put the disc into a CD player, so that means they screwed up big time when programming the audio playback for this one. There's no option to switch to stereo anywhere. The King of Fighters 97, once again from, you guessed it, SNK. This game requires a RAM cart, but fortunately they fixed it so that it no longer matters what size RAM cart you use. You get the same experience either way, which means it's a 1 meg game. It has the standard SNK screen when you try to boot it without a cartridge. They also fixed the audio, or they just didn't screw it up in the first place, so now it plays properly in stereo. Unfortunately, there's barely any music in this game due to a boneheaded creative choice by SNK. As a result, the majority of the game feels empty to me. The gameplay is still fantastic, but to say I was disappointed when I first got this game is an understatement.
Power wave! Power wave!
Marvel Superheroes from Capcom. This fighting game allows the optional use of a 1 meg RAM cart, or you can use a 4 meg as well, but it'll operate in 1 meg mode. You can tell if the RAM card is detected in the option screen. 3M means 3 megs of RAM, 2 of which are already in the Saturn itself. The other one is in the cartridge. This is the only game released outside of Japan that supports a RAM cartridge, though they certainly don't mention that on the packaging. But if you have a cartridge, it works. As you can see here, the RAM cart does improve the animation significantly. It can be tougher to tell during the fast action, of course. Unfortunately, this game has a lot of slowdown. Using the RAM cart might make it a little worse, but not much. It's still really bad without one. Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter from Capcom. This is a fantastic fighting game that requires the 4 MB RAM cartridge specifically. Here's what you get if you don't have one. Yeah, that'll teach you. This is basically an update to X-Men vs. Street Fighter, which I'll get to later. Each side picks 2 fighters, and you can swap between them on the fly as you play. Kind of like Groove on Fight, but it works much better here. Not only that, but the animation is fantastic, the background's varied, and the action is super fun. This one basically recolors the backgrounds from X-Men vs. Street Fighter, changes some characters and adds some more, adds some attacks, and changes the music. There's no slowdown in sight here. This is a phenomenal game. Metal Slug from SNK. This excellent Neo Geo conversion requires a RAM cart, and either the 1MB or 4MB cart will work exactly the same. If you try it without a cartridge, you get this. This version was my first experience with Metal Slug, and needless to say, I was absolutely blown away. What a fantastic run and gun this one is. The RAM cart lets you play the entire level without loading more data midway through like the PlayStation version needs to. Suck on that, PlayStation. Hell, it's nearly identical to the Neo Geo version, except that some of the sound effects and voices are more quiet, and there's a bit more slowdown here for some reason. Also, I found that while the game does default to stereo in the option screen, you have to switch it to mono and then back again to stereo if you actually want it to play back in stereo. Good old SNK. Still amazing though.
Okay, rocket launcher.
There was a rumor that Sega was working on an 8MB RAM cart for a possible port of Virtua Fighter 3 to the Saturn. And that's all that is a rumor. As most of us know, Virtua Fighter 3 ended up on the Dreamcast. Anyway, let's get back to the games that did end up on the Sega Saturn. Noel 3 from Pioneer. I have no clue what's going on here. Lots of anime girls are talking to you. Give this one a try if you're into that. I don't think there's much actual game here. But you can use a RAM card if you have one, no telling what it adds. I'm sure one of you knows though, so please let me know. Pia Carrot 2 from NEC Interchannel. Another wall of Japanese text here. In this one, you're trying to bang all of the girls who work at the restaurant. The one on the PCFX console had cartoon nudity in it, no clue if this one does. For some reason, it uses a RAM cart. Both the 1 and 4MB carts will offer slightly different expanded capabilities, somehow. The title screen will be slightly different depending on which cartridge you have, and the initial load time will be much longer than without a cartridge. Sorry guys, but I only have so much time to mindlessly sift through endless Japanese text, so I'm gonna turn this one off. Hope you don't mind. No anime boobies for you. Pocket Fighter from Capcom. This one is also known as Super Gem Fighter. This simple chibi-style fighting game uses characters from Street Fighter and Darkstalkers. You collect gems to power up your moves. This one doesn't need a RAM cart, but it can optionally use both the 1MB and 4MB cartridge. You can tell which cartridge you have inserted in the option screen. Some people say the 1MB cartridge doesn't work, but hey, there you have it. You'll get more frames of animation with the cartridge, but it's not night and day or anything. Still, it's better to have it than not to, because why wouldn't you want to have all the frames that you're entitled to? Despite the simple 3-button controls, this is a super fun game that comes recommended. Real Bout Garo Densetsu or Real Bout Fatal Fury from SNK. Dear lord, is this game a mess. You need a RAM cart for this fighting game, and of course this screen is what you get otherwise. First things first, I've always been disappointed that you have to fight 3 entire 2-bout matches in a row on the same background in this game. Next, like the King of Fighters 96, the arranged music here is presented in mono because SNK was pretty dumb at the time. It gets better though. If you use the 4MB cartridge, you get lots of graphical glitches in the sprite, so you think, well, it needs the 1MB cartridge. And there are no graphical glitches with this cartridge. However, more than once while playing this game, it went straight to a black screen for me, requiring a reboot. Once right in the middle of a fight, and next after I won all the fights on a stage. I then tried the game on my Model 2 Saturn and the issue never showed up, so play it at your own risk on a Model 1 Saturn. I guess it could be the cartridge pins on my Model 1 Saturn, but it gave me no other issue with any other game I played here in this episode. Real Bout Garo Densetsu Special or Real Bout Fatal Fury Special from SNK. Now this is more like it. Not only is the game much better, but the conversion to the Saturn is better as well. It requires a RAM card and you get your standard screen without one. You can use either a 1MB or 4MB card this time with Noel effects, though it only operates in 1MB mode. This is an excellent conversion of the Neo Geo game, or the Neo Geo CD version specifically. It has that same Blue Mary music video as the Neo CD version, and it has all the same music as well. Yes, in stereo this time. The voices are a bit lower quality, and obviously there is some loading. The game works great on both Model 1 and Model 2 Saturns, and it is a brilliant game all around. It really is too bad that SNK never used the full 4MB RAM cartridge, as this would have improved the voices and maybe even improved a couple of other things. Samurai Spirit Zankuro Musoken, also known as Samurai Shodown 3 from SNK. This is a pretty cool weapons-based fighter. This requires a RAM card and you can use either one without any issue, though of course it will only run in 1MB mode. This is also the last SNK fighting game to be released on the console. Look, they finally made their warning screen when you don't have a cartridge look a little different. The game itself is a pretty good conversion, but beware of the CPU. It's ruthless in this one. In fact, it'll block your special attack and counter after it's over every single time. Also, do not play this game if you're prone to photosensitive seizures. Everything in this game flashes. This is a good game, but it's not my favorite entry into the series. Samurai Shodown 4 from SNK. Wait, didn't I say Part 3 was their last fighting game on the Saturn? Well, it was. Anyway, this is another great weapons-based fighting game. Again, it requires the 1MB RAM cartridge. We're back to the standard error screen if you don't have a RAM cartridge. That's because this game was actually released on the Saturn a year before Samurai Shodown 3, despite being Samurai Shodown 4. As a result, this is another SNK game that will have glitchy graphics if you use a 4MB cartridge, so you don't want to do that. At least the music is in stereo, and honestly I'm a bit amazed given SNK's track record at the time. Other than that, this game plays great on the Saturn, and I feel it's a more enjoyable game than Part 3. The worst thing about this one is probably the quiet and muffled sounding voices. Street Fighter 03 from Capcom, also known as Street Fighter Alpha 3. This is an amazing one-on-one fighting game that requires the 4MB RAM card. Don't have it and you get this. Everything about this game is exceptional. I never really got into the different isms that you can choose. I just brute force my way into the game so I can start playing as fast as possible. The extra 4 megs of RAM definitely help here. Loading times are greatly reduced. Sometimes it almost seems like there aren't any because they're hidden so well. The sounds, voices, music are all very high quality. Also, most, if not all of the animation frames from the arcade are here. Supposedly, only the Sega Saturn with the 4 meg RAM cart is powerful enough to handle T-Hawk's backwards walking animation with all frames intact. Even the Dreamcast version is missing some of these frames. Suck on that, Sega Dreamcast, you piece of crap! Super Real Mahjong P7 from Sega. I'm pretty sure the goal in this one is to get the girls naked by playing Mahjong. If you're a creepy fellow, you might like this. A RAM cart is optional, and you'll get no loading screen if you don't have one, or one of 2 different loading screens depending on if you're using the 1 or 4 megabyte cartridge. This game has a lot of full screen animation, but it's the same whether you use a cartridge or not. As for the gameplay, I could spot 0 differences between all 3. Loading times after you start the game are also identical no matter what. I guess if you like strip Mahjong, bring a RAM cart to maybe get a little bit more of whatever the hell this game offers. Ultraman, Hikari no Kyojin Densetsu from Bandai. This is the second of only 2 games that require their own proprietary ROM cartridge. If you try to boot it without the cartridge or any other cartridge, you get this screen. This is a one-on-one fighting game where you fight other giant beings and monsters. Japan loves giant things fighting in their cities just as much as the United States loves baseball and apple pie. In the Ultra mode, you can choose from a few good guys. In the Versus Com mode, you can choose to play as anyone. The game itself is pretty stiff. You can punch, kick, and block. You press up to jump. There are several special moves to learn for each character. You only have to win one battle and then you move on. The game doesn't load faster than a normal Saturn game between the fights. The ROM card on this one is actually used to store 2 megabytes of sprite data. The graphics are kind of ugly, with many of the monsters looking pretty blocky. The same music plays in every stage with the exception of the final battle. Overall, this is not a game I'd recommend, and I bought it just for this episode. It's also kind of cool to have in my collection, I guess. Like the King of Fighters 95, this one has also been hacked so that the disc loads the data into a RAM cartridge so that you don't need the proprietary cartridge that was packed in with it to play it. Alright, we've got 3 more RAM extended games to go. After that, let's look at a different type of cartridge. Vampire Savior from Capcom. You'll need the 4 megabyte RAM cart for this one, and this is what you'll get if you don't have it. This is a great fighting game with lots of crazy and spooky characters inspired by monster movies and the like. The extra RAM helps with the extremely fluid animation that you'll experience here. It also helps reduce the load time so that it seems like they're not even there. You can change the background to this when you press either the L button or both a kick and a punch button simultaneously, as long as the gauge at the bottom is full. I never really understood what this was all about, but I'm sure these graphics live on the cartridge since it's the same in every single stage. I think I prefer the original game and its follow-up called Night Warriors more than this one, especially the music. But this is still very close behind and comes highly recommended. Waku Waku 7 from Sunsoft. This is a colorful fighting game ported from the Neo Geo. You'll need a RAM cartridge for this one, but it doesn't matter which one you use as it's going to run in 1 meg mode. You'll get this screen if you don't have a cartridge. Unfortunately, they didn't take the time to optimize this one very well. Many, but not all of the backgrounds are lower resolution compared to the Neo Geo version. There's also some slowdown here that definitely wasn't present in the original version. Next, the game loads a lot. It even needs to load between rounds, probably because some of them change color. Overall, it's not a bad game, but the port is a bit disappointing. X-Men vs. Street Fighter from Capcom. This was the very first game on the console to use the 4MB RAM card, and it is required. You get Capcom's standard screen if you don't use it. I bought this one back when it came out, and I was absolutely blown away at the arcade perfection. You choose two characters, as does your opponent, and you can swap them out at any time during the fight as long as they're both still alive. The animation is fantastic, as are the backgrounds, which often feature multiple levels or scenes. Not to mention that it feels like the game never loads other than the initial boot up. Even the music and sounds are great. I own the arcade version of this, and if there's any difference between the two, it's certainly not apparent at a glance. Well, the Saturn version is cropped a tiny bit on the sides due to the slightly lower resolution, but it's not that bad. The characters in the background still all have the same amount of pixels. It goes without saying that this absolutely destroys the PlayStation version. Suck on that, PlayStation.
Cajun strike.
Alright, that's it for the RAM and ROM enhanced games. Now, let's take a look at the games that use the movie card, as it's called in Japan. The movie card, or video CD card, connects to the system through a bus on the inside back of the console. This allows the Saturn to play video CD discs. It uses MPEG-1 video running at a resolution of 320 by 240 with MP2 audio. And, depending on the card, allows you to look at photo CD discs as well. I thought photo CDs were the coolest thing ever when I had my 3DO, and it's awesome to look at these old discs on my Saturn as well. I tell you, developing film to a digital file was the future in the 90s. Damn, I look constipated or something. A handful of games took advantage of this card, so let's check them out. Now, I'm only going to talk about games, not interactive newsletters and other things that were released that use the card. So buckle up for the next 6.5 minutes. Here's Falcom Classics by JVC and, well, Falcom. Falcom Classics is a cool game that features remade versions of the first Ys game, Xanadu, and Dragon Slayer. The Saturn mode of Ys has gotten an English patch, and I hope the rest of the games do someday as well. None of these titles support the video CD card directly. However, this one comes with the Falcom Classics Special CD. There are a few videos on here, like interviews. Also, this one where the lady takes you into Falcom or maybe a Falcom store or something. The video done by the Saturn looks good, but it's pretty choppy. The video CD card fixes that, and in some cases makes the video full screen. Gungriffon from Game Arts. This is a really cool mech game, and it even got released in Europe and North America, not just in Japan like the majority of these other games. It is absolutely worth playing. All of the full motion videos use the video CD card for better video, but only the Japanese version. And even though the MPEG video data is present on the North American and European game discs, they won't play even if you have a card inserted. Gungriffon 2, which came out 2 years later in Japan, does not use the video CD card. Lunar, Silver Star Story Complete from Game Arts. This is a remake of Lunar from the Sega CD. It's a fantastic RPG, but completely in Japanese on the Saturn. There is an English text patch for this one which takes its text from the PlayStation version. This is the only game in this episode which requires a video CD card to run. You get this screen if you don't have one, which tells you that you need one or maybe a high Saturn. That was the Hitachi Saturn model that came with a video CD card. This one uses the video CD for all of the video cutscenes, of which there are quite a few. Unfortunately, the video doesn't look as good as it could. First of all, it's very soft. Next, it looks improperly scaled. Look at the shimmering as it scrolls here. Or the jagginess of his round glasses. If you don't have a video CD card, you can play Lunar's Silver Star story instead. This is not the complete version. The Saturn renders the video here, and it's much smaller and of course a bit fuzzy. Comparing the normal Saturn video, the Saturn with the video CD card, and the PlayStation version, I think I like the PlayStation version the best. It's not quite as large as the Saturn with a video CD card, and it's also a little grainier, but it's a lot sharper with bolder colors, and generally I just think it looks better. Cradle from Pack-In Video. This is an adventure game where you play a detective, kind of an interactive point and click from the looks of it. This actually might be pretty interesting if I can understand everything, or anything. Pack-In Video packed in some great looking video using the video CD card. It's not full screen and even the small videos use it. You may not think that it does at first, but try playing the game without the video CD card. The difference in quality, well, it's rather significant. Sentimental Graffiti from NEC Interchannel. This is a dating simulator. Pretty good if you need practice dating, I guess. The game comes packed with a second disc called Second Window. This uses the VCD card for an opening anime thing that's not present at all if you boot it without the card. And what the hell are these girls even doing? All other videos on this disc are done by the Saturn itself. Vatlva from Ancient. This is an odd vehicular combat game that takes place in an arena setting. The controls definitely take a bit of getting used to, but once you do, there's plenty of fun to be had here. Up to 6 players can simultaneously enjoy murdering each other. The game has an opening cartoon and probably an ending one as well. I haven't beaten the game. Using a video CD card allows the video to be much larger, have a bit less compression noise, and have a faster frame rate. Like Lunar, the video is rather soft and it's also been scaled, so it's not as good as it could be. This generic VCD card would only play a few seconds of the intro before jumping to the title screen, but this JVC one works fine. Wangan Dead Heat plus Real Arrange from Pack-In Video. This is a rather unremarkable racing game. The control is decent, but it looks fairly generic, even for its time. There is full motion video in the intro, and also of the girls that you're trying to impress with your sweet driving skills. As you can imagine, the video CD card makes these all look quite a bit better. A ton better, in fact, as the size, clarity, and frame rate are all improved. This one also came with a second disc featuring behind-the-scenes video of the girls. This also uses the video CD card to make everything look significantly better. This game was actually released in the West as Highway 2000. It has a different intro, no video of the girls, and of course the video CD card is completely ignored.
もう感激。お願い、一緒にいてもいいでしょ?
And there you go, every game that takes advantage of the expansion cartridges. So, what do you think? Do you think they made a difference? I certainly think they did. In fact, I love the Capcom arcade ports. You really can't beat them. And how do you think it compares to the Nintendo 64 expansion pack? Better? Worse? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSag. I get asked a lot of questions, and probably the fourth most question I'm asked is, "Hey Joe, how many cartridges for the Sega Saturn do you have?" Well, I have a total of 9. The next most asked question is, "Hey Joe, how many Nintendo 64 cartridges do you have?" Well, the answer to that is 6. Does that mean that I like the Sega Saturn more than I like the Nintendo 64 since I have more Saturn cartridges than Nintendo 64 cartridges? The second most asked question is, "Hey Joe, how many cartridges do you have for the Sega CD?" Well, I have but 1. And the most asked question is, "Hey Joe, when is this sketch gonna stop being dumb and start being funny?" Never.